Welcome to another episode of Talking Fast, a Gilmore Girls podcast. I'm Suzanne.
And I'm Alexis.
And we're two longtime fans of the show, and we're excited to rewatch and recap it along the way.
Today we're covering Season 1, Episode 18, The Third Lorelai. When Lorelai's grandmother offers a trust fund for Rory's education, Emily fears losing contact with a financially independent Lorelai and Rory.
Exciting. I have to say, I love Trix. I think she's great.
Oh, what?
I know.
Okay,
I know.
we'll talk about it.
I mean, she's not nice by any means, but I like what she brings to the table, I guess. I don't know.
Okay.
We'll get into it.
All right. And first, shall we do our Talking Fast segment?
Yeah, I suppose so. Okay, are you ready?
Yep.
Okay, go.
There are many Friday night dinners in this episode. The first one establishes that Trix is coming to visit. Then there are more dinners that are awkward with Trix and everyone there because she's kind of overbearing. Emily has a complex relationship with her. There's also a study group thing going on, creating a government. Seems like a fun project. Drama between Rory and Tristan and Paris. Rory sets Paris up on a date. She yells at her at the end. There's a trust fund going on, and Suzanne can tell you more. I might have cheated.
Nah, I just let you go 0.6. Is that 6 milliseconds, I guess? Over.
We'll have to throw it out then.
Yeah.
This doesn't count. Disqualified.
I'll just place the buzzer right over your talking.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it would be like or you could play me off like I'm at the Oscars, you know?
If I had the technological skills to do that, I would.
Mm-hmm. Okay, are you ready?
I guess so.
Okay. On your mark, get set, go.
So we start off by finding out that Trix is going to come visit. Emily goes downstairs to the basement and starts pulling out all the things that she's ever been given. Not at the same time, but later on, Rory is in a group with Paris and Madeline and Louise and Tristan, the only students we know from Chilton, and they're creating a government. Rory and Tristan talk, and Rory tries to get Tristan to take Paris out for dinner. Eventually, Paris and Tristan have a date, and it's very bad, and then Trix takes Emily, and oh my god, I start panicking. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe by the time we get to season 7, I won't panic at these 30-second recaps.
Yeah, we'll be cool, calm, and collected.
Yeah. In the meantime, it's practice, I suppose. Okay, I guess we should definitely slow down and get to some of the details. I really liked how this episode started with a Friday night dinner and just the 3 women, Emily, Lorelai, and Rory, sitting there in silence, and Emily being kind of disgruntled about how 3 women can sit there and not have a single thing to talk about. Which I understand. Sometimes there's just nothing to say.
Agreed. And that also pushes Lorelai to start saying like nonsensical things as well. She
says a butt model makes $10,000 a day, which is that's pretty amazing. But I don't know. I guess you do have to probably put a lot of work into having a butt worthy of modeling.
I guess. And if you buy the butt, like through surgery, that might cost more too. But
that's true.
I feel like this is what Lorelai would want us just get sidetracked immediately by her small offhand comment.
Yeah, exactly. Of course, Emily does not find it funny.
No. And I also noticed in the scene that their new maid is named Siri, which made me think of the iPhone.
I thought about that also for a second. I was like, because Emily was just like calling commands to Siri, and for a second I thought
foreshadowing.
Yeah.
But the main point of this scene is to establish that Trix, or, the third Gilmore, or the first Gilmore probably, first Lorelai, I should say, is going to be visiting in a week. And Emily reacts negatively, like, immediately.
Yeah, she goes down to the basement and starts pulling out all of the things that Trix has ever given her. Trix is Richard's pet name for his mother, by the way. Just to avert some confusion. I don't understand how that nickname comes up, but anyways. And I think it's funny that Lorelai goes down and is seeing all the stuff that Emily's pulling out, and it just reminds me so much of pretty much any gift from your grandparents when you're especially like a teenager or something, and your grandparents get you clothes or something for a holiday or your birthday, and most of the time you only wear them when you're going to see your grandparents. That's what it felt like at this moment.
I loved seeing Emily in this state because she's freaking out. She's so flustered. I've never seen her so, she's usually, unless she's angry, we've seen that side of her, but we've never seen her like lose composure due to nerves or anxiety. And she is like very manically pulling out all of this different furniture. She has Lorelai help her carry out this really heavy rug, and it's like immediately, she has a week, but she's doing it all right now. She's so stressed out, and it's also perfect because it's so ironic. Like Emily has dictated her own taste to Lorelai so many times. She's acted like she knows everything about style and taste, and Lorelai is so like tacky for not following it. And here she is, like that's the card she's been dealt by her mother-in-law. And I just think it is so funny and so like you get what you give kind of.
So hypocritical. I was surprised that Lorelai didn't make a big deal out of that, like pointing out how hypocritical Emily was being. But I also thought that she was just kind of enjoying seeing her mother sweat like that, which clearly is what's happening later on.
Yeah, that'll be a running theme of like Rory saying, "Don't be mean, don't enjoy your mom suffering," and Lorelai's like, I'm not, but I am gonna take this camera to dinner with me. Like, don't worry about it.
The days before smartphones.
After this scene, we turn to the second plot line, the next day, which is a Chilton group project. Once again, this reminds me very much of the group project we saw earlier in the season that brought together Paris, Madeline, Louise, and Rory. This time, Tristan and a few other unnamed, unpresent people are in their group, I think really to service some interesting like character development and plot lines between that group of students. And once again, I think this plot device works for the episode. I think this is a more fun group project. They're coming up with their own government, which I think is a very interesting hypothetical thing. Like if I had to teach government or politics or something, I think I'd like to do a class like this. Yeah. It was cool.
I was a bit confused about the premise of the project, like because they started off talking about Elizabeth I, so I was thinking maybe they have to do a historical government. Or maybe like each group is given a different time period and they have to make a government like that. But Parliament wasn't really a thing in the Elizabethan period. So I'm not really sure where, maybe Paris just wanted their government to be basically the English government.
Yeah. I almost wondered if it was like create your government, but cite like your models or why you think this would work and what I don't know, but she does mention the Elizabethan government model, but says there should be a king and queen. And I didn't fully understand why that felt a little like on the nose of like, oh, the writers want to like address this Tristan and Rory thing because they kissed last episode.
Yeah, I can't imagine Paris being pro-monarchy. It just doesn't seem like Paris to me.
No. I think we all know she'd clearly be like a dictator.
Yeah. And if there was going to be a monarchy, I don't see Paris thinking that there needs to be a king.
Yeah. Agreed.
But this also made me realize just how much Shakespearean stuff and like from that time period the Chilton curriculum relies upon. So far it seems like most of what they've been learning has been about Shakespeare, more or less, or like around that time period. And this isn't the end of Shakespeare for Chilton. So I'm just very confused about the breadth of their curriculum.
Yeah, that's a great point to raise, and it makes me wonder what the Yale curriculum will look like, because I'm kind of wondering, like, is this the Amy Sherman Palladino imaginary of what a private school curriculum is like, and then what is her take on like a Ivy League school later on? Because yeah, you think even if they do have like a very exclusive reading list, they would still read more than this, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot more to learn than just about Shakespeare and the Elizabethan period. Although it is pretty fun and they have cool outfits and stuff. But
right. And Louise, it was Louise, right? Says that she plans to wear like a lady in waiting like ruby low cut dress or something like that, because they get the sex, she says.
I was thinking if this was about the time that The Tudors was on TV. I don't know if you've ever seen that show. But it is basically like a sexy Renaissance show. That's about it.
Definitely. But running throughout this scene and the following one after their class, Rory and Tristan are having these little awkward encounters, such as like their hands graze when she turns the page in her book. They tried to leave the door at the same time. And this is really implying there's some unresolved tension. And Rory basically says, we need to talk about this. And Tristan agrees. They're having this conversation, I notice, at the very front of a classroom while students are coming in. It's like a in-between class period. And I just was thinking, like, if I were in the show, I'd just be the person like sitting in the desk waiting for class to start, listening to like Rory and Tristan talk about their relationship drama, you know, like just why are they doing this? It's like the TV of it all. It's like, what a weird spot for them. But that was probably the set that they had up, you know, the classroom. It was silly.
Yeah, I got a very, well, I guess I really understood why some people are into Tristan in these scenes. If we were to completely ignore everything he'd done up until last episode, this would just be like the Chad Michael Murray from the Cinderella story, like that kind of like heartthrob guy who's kind of emotional but awkward. But of course, he's also been terrible and mean and sexist, and we can't forget that.
I agree. Like, I found him to be the least annoying he's been the entire season, this kind of like awkward version of him. But I was like, the switch flips so fast. You're right. Like, there's no acknowledgement of how he acted previously. And I'm like, are we supposed to think either his public heartbreak, like when Summer dumped him, combined with the kiss with Rory and his new crush on Rory, like, are we supposed to believe those things completely changes how he acts entirely, and that Rory entirely forgave him? We already like questioned if that would be the case, and it's, I don't know. I have complicated feelings about it. I'm like, you can't just change his character. And if you do show a bit more development, this was too fast to just flip in a couple episodes.
Yeah, it was, I don't know, they just really, really wanted it to be like a blonde rich dean, I think, for Rory to look at and to possibly go out with. And I'm glad it doesn't go anywhere. And I kind of liked that Rory, in the moment when they were sitting down and talking about their relationship, Rory kind of, in a roundabout way, did the whole let's just be friends thing. So it's kind of like the door is kind of closed on them, at least from Rory's point of view. So that's good, at least, I think.
Is this the point when they were thinking about like, oh, if we have a blonde rich guy, but he's not like entirely an asshole? Is this like where they started to think about Logan?
Like, yeah, maybe.
He'll be an asshole, but not completely. He'll be at Yale or something like that.
Yeah. I had a moment after their conversation here. So after Rory has suggested to Tristan that he ask Paris out, which I think was just a bad move all around. Just because Paris is interested in Tristan does not mean that they would be a good match at all. And I don't understand how Rory thought it would go well. But after this, Paris and Rory are talking, and Paris gives Rory her manifesto. And this is actually where I had my Rory's bookshelf moment. And it ties into one that I accidentally almost had many episodes ago, where I thought that they were talking about the Unabomber. I think in the episode where Dean comes up to the window when Rory's out and talks to Lorelai. Paris asks whether manifesto is a little bit too cabin in the woods, and Rory replies saying, don't open your mail. And this is a direct reference to the Unabomber, and I know I'm right this time. Because the Unabomber, like, hid out in the woods. Like, he was basically a recluse in a cabin in the woods, and then he sent these bombs to people in the mail. So I know that that's who they're talking about this time. So that was my little true crime Rory's bookshelf moment.
When was that exactly?
That was after...
Because Rory and Tristan talk, and then there's the scene at the inn, and then Rory and Tristan talk again.
Yeah, so it must have been before. Sorry. So this was before the scene at the inn. So they've just decided that they were going to be working over the weekend, and Rory and Tristan haven't talked yet. Sorry.
Okay.
Very confusing.
Yeah, no, it's totally fine, but I got a little lost. Okay. So at the inn, the main purpose of this scene is that Lorelai picks up the phone and it's Emily calling her, asking, or should I say demanding, to get this horrible coat rack back from Lorelai. And Lorelai really takes this on, really jokes about how she's so shocked that Emily gave her a used present, because clearly that, like, goes against proper decorum. And Lorelai says, "What would Miss Manners say about this?" And Emily responds, "If she met your grandmother, she'd understand." And I had a good laugh about that. And I also wanted to nominate it for my Rory's bookshelf moment. I just thought this was a really funny scene of Lorelai giving her mom a hard time about the whole used present thing, because I can totally see Emily saying, like, you should never do that. And this Miss Manners reference was something I wasn't so familiar with, so I did look that up. And if I located the correct Miss Manners, this was an advice column which began in 1978. So I think that would make sense that it would have been popular at this time of Stars Hollow events happening, because it was distributed across 200 newspapers worldwide. And Miss Manners was a figure who would answer etiquette questions from her readers and publish essays on problems of manners and things. And I think the actual woman, I think was Judith Martin. Her last name is Martin. Was the person behind Miss Manners. And yeah, that's about all I have to say about that. But I've always thought the whole idea of manners and taste and decorum that we see through Emily are fascinating. And I thought it was funny that she was the one in the wrong, the out of the decorum here, and Lorelai could tease her about it.
Yeah. That reminds me, I don't know if you've ever watched Downton Abbey, but towards the end of the series, Edith is running a newspaper and she starts running an advice column, which ends up being written by the butler of her grandmother. But it's got some pretty funny advice bits in there. I don't know if those still happen in newspapers. I bet they do.
Yeah, it seems a bit old-fashioned to try to uphold the proper manners of white bourgeois society, so I could see why they would be not so common anymore. But I think there are certain manners that could still be beneficial, like being polite and writing a nice email or things. But I could see why you do away with the whole not giving a used gift. Like, a used gift could be fine if the other whatever.
Yeah.
I don't need to go off on that, but
No, that's true. I liked this little scene at the end, and it almost got my Lorelai's Closet nomination for Lorelai's like turtleneck kind of shirt that she was wearing with like a pink and brown and gray pattern on it, but something else came up later that knocked it out of the water. But yeah.
Nice. So after this, we return to Chilton. And as you had mentioned earlier, this is when we see a conversation between Rory and Tristan, since they've agreed to talk. And Rory essentially does say the whole friends idea. And she also mentions this. She says, like, why don't you pick a girl with a little more substance who is smart and driven and has ambition, like Paris? And I did not put this as my Friday night dinner critique, but I did want to flag, like, this is just what we've talked about before of like there's Rory and Paris, ideal women. They're so great. But all the other girls are just so vapid and no ambition. Like, for all we know, Summer could have plenty. She could be very smart and ambitious, but she just wanted to kiss multiple people. Like, that doesn't mean, or the fact that, like, if someone would like to be a trophy wife, like, so that's like what they want to be in life. They probably have good hobbies or do other things too. I was just a little annoyed.
Yeah, I did nominate this as my Friday night dinner for exactly those reasons.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Because Rory was saying that he shouldn't pick girls who were stupid and dumb, and I was just thinking back to Summer at that party, and she didn't seem dumb at all to me. She just seemed like she had an idea of what she wanted and she was going to go for it, and she wasn't going to just go along with Tristan because he was hot. And I was kind of disappointed that was the only reason that Rory thought that Paris and Tristan would be good together, is because Paris was different from the girls that he dated before, which is something I always have a problem with, like the not like other girls trope in literature and movies and stuff. And I think it was kind of a bad move of Rory, because as I said, like there's literally no reason why this would work out. Tristan is kind of enamored with him, but if they really had a conversation, would they have much to talk about? Or is it just a physical thing? And Tristan has no reason to like Paris. Like he's just not interested in her. They've known each other for so long and he hasn't been interested in her. So I think Rory thought that it was kind of like I'm pointing this out, you've never thought of it before, and it's like she was always right there in front of you. But I just don't think that's right, and I don't think that Rory was really taking into account their personalities.
No. And later on, Madeline and Louise also say that Tristan's type is like a bad girl. And Rory implies that here too, like you never go for girls like Paris. But are we ignoring that he's obviously had a crush on Rory for like months now? So like, what is his type? Like he's clearly been into Rory, so I feel like she's actually slightly even wrong in her kind of rude statement as well.
Yeah. And also, would we consider Paris a good girl? I don't know. Paris maybe has a little bit too much nuance for this conversation.
Yeah. And I think this is the start of Rory obviously not noticing that Tristan is into her, to the point that I'm a bit like, Rory is smarter than that, even if she's not as experienced at dating. Like, he literally said, do you want to try it again? Talking about the kiss. Like, he's asking her to kiss again. And later on, he's going to be like, I like someone else. And she's like, oh, okay. And it's that classic trope of not realizing the someone else is you.
Yeah.
So it's ironic also that she's saying go date someone smart when, like, she's not being that smart right now.
And he's also made his intentions clear many times in the past that he wants to date Rory, or at least, like, have her as a conquest or something. But
yeah,
this is just such a bad move on Rory's part.
Yeah, inwardly screaming and anticipating that. But we can talk about that more when she finds out later.
Yeah.
All right. Speaking of tense moments, we have our Friday night dinner with Trix. And on the way there, I had my Stars Hollow moment. It's like a close call because we're like not even in Stars Hollow anymore. But it was as they were transporting the coat rack to the house. I just thought this was like so funny. I don't know if we've talked about it too much before, but Lorelai's Jeep is like iconically Stars Hollow to me, in her whole like love and loyalty to it, that she'll later on like replace it with the exact car, or like spend so much to get it fixed so that it's the same car. So it's very much like a fixture of the town to me. And I thought this was such a Stars Hollow-esque way to transport this coat rack, because it's like sticking out the back of her car. It looks really awkward and it seems really out of place in the car. And later on, I also just think the coat rack itself is hilarious, because on the phone, Emily described it as being like awful looking. And I think she said it might have like beasts or dragons or something that you hang your coats on. Yeah, thank you. But when I was looking at it, once they bring it into the house, it looked like just baby cherubs, like little angel figures. So
yeah, it was definitely ugly.
It was ugly. Yeah, it was ugly and just funny. When Emily answers the door, she's like, "Do you have it?" And they're very like sneakily trying to get it in. There's a bit of like physical comedy to it as well. I was just like, that's good. That's good. A bit of lighthearted fun to what will be like a heavy dinner, you know?
Yeah. I also had, I didn't have my Stars Hollow moment in this, but I have my Lorelai's closet moment as we meet Trix for the first time. So after the whole coat rack or hat rack or whatever it is, after that moment, they go into the parlor and they see Trix sitting there. She's wearing like, it looks like an old-fashioned, I don't know, English rich person's outfit or something, but she has a gold monocle that she's using to read, and I love it. I want one of those. I mean, I don't have a use for that, but I want one of those, or a pocket watch or something, so bad, because I'm just a weird person who likes antiques. But it was just so cool and so strange, and like brought so much weirdness to her personality before she even spoke, just like sitting there reading the newspaper with a monocle. It was awesome, and I want one. This is, I think, one of the first Lorelai's closet moments where I've actually wanted the thing that I've nominated.
I like it. And like the old English rich person outfit, that's the technical term for that style, I think.
Yeah, like white kind of ruffles at the collar. I don't know. It's very weird.
I know exactly what you're talking about. She looked like she could have been in like, I mean, I don't even know. Oh, she reminds me of the grandma from Little Women.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
A little bit. That's like the most recent movie I've seen. But and similarly to the grandmother in Little Women, Trix is this figure in the family who seems to like have a bit of control and like access to wealth that could influence the family members around her, at least like Rory and Lorelai, as we'll come to see. But so you mentioned at the start that you like Trix as a character, at least. So I'll let you say a bit about what draws you to her, or like what's entertaining about her to you, and then maybe I'll follow, because I did place a bit of a Friday night dinner critique with her character.
Well, I definitely see why she is a questionable character. She's very mean to Emily, and like points out flaws of Emily's in a really unnecessary way. But I really liked how she talked to Lorelai about like Lorelai's business. She really complimented her on being a hard worker, which I think is kind of ironic coming from somebody who just has family wealth. But I thought that was really nice. And she also likes Lorelai's jokes in a weird way. Although later on she does tell Lorelai that, you know, she's had enough of the jokes. But she does appreciate Lorelai in a way that Emily I think secretly does, but would never say. And I was just thinking of this, especially in contrast with the Strobe and Francine meeting for Rory. So she's meeting her great grandma for the first time, and I felt like it went much better. She got to talk to her a bit more, and I don't know, I just like that Trix is so crass in a very Richie Rich kind of way. Like the way that she shuts down Emily. Maybe I was kind of channeling Lorelai and laughing at Emily's discomfort.
No, I think I agree that as as a character placed into this family dynamic, I like it quite a lot because it stirs up everything that we've gotten used to. Like, we know how Emily and Lorelai relate. We know like how Rory and her grandparents relate. So to throw in a new person who like holds even more power than Emily and Richard in the family dynamic made it really interesting. So, but I do like think my critique is mostly about the way that she does treat Emily, because I do think she is just so so overbearing and inconsiderate to Emily, like bossing her around, asking her to do things like, and it is funny too, so I kind of have a bit of a mixed feeling about it. Like, she says, am I supposed to eat that cheese, when Emily brings her cheese? So then Emily goes to get her nuts, and she's like, am I supposed to just put those in my hands? So Emily goes to get plates and silverware, and then she's like, let's go to dinner. So like, it's kind of funny, but it's also so cruel. And like the way she manipulates Emily and Richard, because Richard is such a mama's boy, we come to find out in these scenes. But the line that I thought I would base my critique on is this line that Trix says pretty early on when she's observing Lorelai and Rory for the first time, and she's like wanting to get a look at them. She says they're healthy, and she points out that Gilmores don't get sick, and it's because of the Gilmore blood, and Gilmores don't get headaches and things like this. And she's like literally implying Emily's vitality or like constitution is worse because of her blood, like her family, that she's beneath the Gilmore name. And it's so rude, and there's so much like stuff going behind that whole like metaphor. Or I think she literally does mean blood too, though. Which, as you say, is ironic, because she like, does she do anything? Does she really work or have like, what does she use her health for? Like her generational wealth? Yeah, I don't really know, but like it reminded me, I think the last thing I would say is that it reminds me of like the dynamic between Rory and Logan's family when she goes and she discovers like, oh, actually the Gilmore blood or name is not the top of the line. Like, there's actually other social circles who consider themselves even better than that, and Rory's treated like shit at that family's house. And but yet, like, that's also how Emily treats any guy that that Lorelai and Rory bring to her house. So I'm just noticing these like patterns of cruelty, that even though Emily is like at the brunt of Trix's cruelty toward her, she still returns that exactly the same way to like Luke or Jess or Dean if they come by. And it's only like Logan who she will like treat kindly. So that's a whole bunch of thoughts in my critique there for today, but it's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, I agree. This whole problem of like the idealization of blood purity is a huge problem. I feel like I don't even need to say that, but as we see daily, I guess we do. But I think there are a lot of instances in this show where we kind of get like bits of that, and I need to learn more about the DAR, but I think that that's one of the biggest components that I see in the show that like really focuses on that kind of blood purity and like following a pure bloodline from a certain ancestor or something like that. I don't know if I'm remembering this incorrectly or not, but I think that Trix married a cousin. I'm pretty sure at some point later on we find out that her maiden name was also Gilmore, and then she married her cousin.
Oh.
So it's like, it truly is like basically
I
a
think
pure
that
bloodline, which is,
mhm.
yeah, very, very problematic.
Right. That is so ironic to think about. I mean, and like the what I think we like class like the European aristocrat like we joke about how they all married within their family, and then that ironically produces people with like worse health because that's not actually a good practice, right? And then there's also then the context of like, yeah, the US and the whole white supremacy kind of logic behind also believing in purity of blood and like,
Yeah. And the fact that Trix very clearly here equates blood purity with supremacy, like literal
yeah,
supremacy.
like we're
Of
better,
health.
we don't get headaches.
Yeah, that's, yeah, something that the show doesn't really, like, the show uses it as comedy here, but I
Mm-hmm.
think there's a lot more to be dug into about that. And I think, yeah, once we get more into DAR stuff, I'm going to learn more about the DAR also, because I don't want to make any assumptions, but just how it's portrayed in the show, you know. We interrupt this podcast with a message from our sponsor.
Have you recently stood up a will they, won't they special friend for a painting date? Broken up with a girlfriend abruptly after she didn't say I love you back? Upset your daughter by suggesting a trust fund for her child would tear the two of them apart based on your own resolved emotional trauma? Or set your friend up on a date, she found out about it, and now she's humiliated and says she hates you?
In any of these scenarios, you might want to purchase the other person flowers that say, I'm so sorry, or will you say you love me already? Or please forgive me, I should communicate my true feelings openly and probably go to therapy. Or I only meant well, please don't hate me anymore, and also could you give me back my mom's black miniskirt?
The Stars Hollow Flower Shop is the perfect place for all of your unique flower needs. We've got lilacs, white roses, carnations, and much more. All perfect options for the person in your life you might owe an apology to.
And for listeners of Talking Fast, we've got a special offer for you this spring. Mention code I'm sorry at the main counter and you'll receive 25% off a specially arranged bouquet of flowers. Just let the employee know what the favorite color of your hurt friend is, and they'll whip you up something to delight and appease. Another thing that Trix is very anti is Harvard. So we get like a little bit of conversation about Rory's schooling, and in this conversation Trix also finds out that Lorelai's getting help from Emily and Richard, which will lead to something else, but she also is aghast that Rory is considering Harvard rather than Yale, and it's just a huge deal. Which might be one of the first times that we really find out that Richard went to Yale and wouldn't be happy with Harvard. I don't know that that's come up yet, but
Right. They really lead you to think she's going to go to Harvard. This is, as we've said, this is a spoiler podcast. Like,
yeah.
but that was actually truly a twist when she goes to Yale. I was like,
Yeah.
anyways. Okay, so speaking of Rory's schooling, we return the next day in the next scene to the Saturday study session that Paris has insisted on for this group project. So we must assume the stakes are high. They don't really mention like why they are spending so much time, but they are. And this is why Rory won't go to the second dinner with her grandparents and her mom. Well, so in general, Rory walks in with a bunch of coffee for everyone, and she gives Paris the specific coffee order, which I had two things to think about here. First is that I thought it was nice that she got her specific drink, and it shows that perhaps they're progressing in their friendship more if she knows like her exact order. But secondly, the drink was a decaf, And I wondered, like, does Paris not drink caffeine because she's already so high energy and high strung that it would just, like, send her over a cliff?
Oh, gosh.
But I also, like, would envision Paris as someone who would be, like, hyped up on caffeine at all times. Like, I was just surprised by the decaf. And I'm just morally opposed to decaf coffee.
I drink decaf.
I'm all about that caffeine.
I drink decaf every day because I
All right.
can't tolerate caffeine. It's really sad as I've gotten older. But actually, this moment was also my Stars Hollow moment. I had trouble finding one for this episode because we didn't spend much time in Stars Hollow. But I picked it for an imaginary scenario, which is Rory stopping in at Luke's before getting on the bus to go to Chilton, just mentioning where she was going, and then Luke showing up moments later with a box of donuts for her to take to her classmates and asking for the coffee order. And I know this is all imaginary and it didn't actually happen as far as we know, but that's how I imagine this moment happening. And then Rory showing up and giving everybody donuts that I don't remember. They had clown faces or something. They were strange.
Yeah, and they had hats.
Yeah, very weird.
But I like that. I like that idea. Definitely.
Maybe actually thinking about those donuts, that wouldn't be something Luke would have in his establishment. But oh well.
Oh well. Oh well.
It's a nice thought.
The major thing that happens in this scene is Tristan asking Paris out, and then Paris getting some feedback and advice from Madeline, Louise, and Rory in a fairly humorous conversation where Madeline and Louise, like, they do have the upper hand over Paris a bit in their experience and knowledge of dating. Paris is like, she knows so much more than Madeline and Louise, obviously, but they're like sharing all this knowledge that even if it's correct or not, like, they are experienced daters. They're talking about things like a water bra and like if you are asked in less than 24 hours, it might mean someone was, someone canceled. It makes me think a lot of like, it's like the younger teen girl version of all of Emily's social knowledge. Mm-hmm. Like later on, Emily will make a big deal about being invited to Sookie's wedding and it means someone dropped out. This is the same thing that they're implying like, oh, it means, whatever. But I can see basically why Paris goes to Rory for help later on because they really like intimidate her in this moment.
Mm-hmm. They talk about having a pink lady makeover, referencing the group of women in Greece. Are they called the Pink Ladies? Mm-hmm. I know they have the pink jackets. I don't remember.
Yeah, the Pink Ladies.
Yeah. And I liked that reference. If it hadn't been for the Unabomber, that would have been my Rory's bookshelf. But
You're vindicated by the Unabomber reference.
But I love the, like, I don't know what it is about makeover montages and stuff in, like, teen movies, but there's just something very satisfying about them in a really weird way. And so I liked that they were proposing this. Although I am also glad that Paris didn't go to them and get a pink lady makeover. I can't imagine what that would have been like.
I know, exactly. I think part of what makes makeovers so satisfied is when it's the ones that like enhance the person and it's like it's still a version of themselves but like new and improved versus there's so many makeup montages that we see also that are like totally not that person. Mm-hmm. And I definitely think that's what would have happened to Paris. Like, she does not need a water bra.
Yeah. Oh, my God. I do remember when water bras were things.
I think that was before my time.
It was crazy. I guess this came out in probably, like, 2002 at this point. So I was, like, right around my, like, bra-wearing years. So everybody was like, all the girls were talking about wearing their first bras and stuff like that. And I just remember, I think it was probably Victoria's Secret or one of those big brands. God, such a hard word.
Their big bra.
Yeah. I don't think the water bras lasted very long because of practical reasons such as explosions and leaking.
Can you imagine?
That would be so embarrassing. Like, you go to hug somebody or something and just start leaking. I mean, I guess that probably happens when people are breastfeeding, but that's a different, more biologically.
Different. Yeah.
Yeah, that was, for a real reason. Anyways.
Totally. So fast forward a bit later in the day, as we've alluded to, Paris is nervous about getting ready for this date, and she does want help, and she decides to turn to Rory. And I thought this was so sweet. Like, she says, "You said I could come to you if I needed someone to talk to." And at this point, I was like feeling a bit of dread because I knew Paris was going to get, like, obviously I knew she was going to find out and be angry at Rory later on. And I was disappointed and anxious about that watching this, because this is such a lovely scene between them. And they're really progressing to the furthest point in their friendship. And they're about to have such a big backslide later on. I was like, no. But I did enjoy it while it lasted. And I had my Lorelai's Closet nomination. And it's not actually when they go to Lorelai's closet to get Paris an outfit. I want to nominate here Paris's closet, okay? Because she says she's brought all of her clothes that she owns, which is just a small pile, so I don't know if that's true, but like, she says she brought everything in case something has hidden potential. And I just want to say, like, sure, her clothes might be a bit boring or professional, maybe a bit lackluster in comparison to Lorelai, but they also, like, have value. They're probably comfortable. She's probably like confident in them. I don't know. I'm just like, there's a place for. I just feel very represented as a person who is not that fashionable, should I say? Like, I'm more like a Paris in terms of that than like a Rory or a Lorelai. I like, I try to be fashionable occasionally. I like some of my fancier outfits, but I'm more, if I could be in my perfect state, I'd be an even more casual version of Paris with like sweatpants and then maybe like a nicer top if I have to be on Zoom, right? Like, I just wanted to like shed a little bit of like praise on her own wardrobe. Like, it's doing just fine. I think it gets even better. Like, I thought the outfit she wears to study the next day was cute. She had like a longer cardigan on, like, just because you're not a fashionista does not mean you don't also deserve nominations for your outfits.
Yeah. I liked all of her clothes. None of them were like, it wasn't the color palette I would choose. They were all kind of like beige and brown.
Neutral.
I would choose more like navy or black, but I liked all the clothes. And she also, like, all of her clothes fit her really well, which I feel like is not something that happens easily as a teenager. And they all like look good on her and fit her personality. And I did, really like the outfit she wore the next day. And I have to, when she got her Lorelai's Closet makeover, I guess, I have to say she looked good in the outfit, but the top is that kind of material. It's a material that I hate. It's like a super synthetic, thin, translucent material that you just get sweaty in, and it also like doesn't soak up any sweat, so you just end up kind of dripping sweat, and you're gonna be nervous going on this date.
We know she's gonna be sweating.
Yeah, I can just imagine her like just having like a pool of nervous sweat, and it's just not going anywhere, and I don't know. Ugh. I just hate that fabric. It's
Though I did have a question. Did you notice that Paris said she brought everything she wears except her uniform and her bar mitzvah dress? And is she Jewish?
She must.
Is that a joke?
I think she is Jewish, but I don't feel like we ever get any more references to that.
Yeah, because I was like, I feel like if Paris's family was Jewish, and like that could have been a whole super interesting thing to bring into like Paris's background and her presence at Chilton and whatnot. Like, I don't know, maybe Amy was saving that for Marvelous Mrs. Maisel or something, but I don't know. I was just so thrown off by that comment.
Yeah, something I want to say that we get more references of her being Jewish, but I can't think of them specifically, so I might be wrong. To me, it kind of fit with her personality, like Jewish, stereotype that was on TV at this time with like the kind of fast talking, outgoing,
basically
Lorelai.
Person.
Yeah, I did notice it, but it didn't seem out of character to her. But if it is true, then why that would have been I think a bigger plot point for Paris, maybe, but maybe not.
Yeah. It could be something for us to like track a bit more, not only with Paris, but also just the elements of Jewish culture that make their way into Gilmore Girls, because I think I have read before, and maybe I can look into it a bit more, but people have talked about Amy Sherman Palladino incorporating like Jewish references and things like that in Gilmore Girls, that she then later, like, almost the like lifeblood of Marvelous Mrs. Maisel is Jewish culture, you know? And Midge, the main character, like Amy always has her like fast talking brunette women as like the lead, and Midge is like a fully like a Jewish woman, and that's like part of her identity, and that is so much more like fully explored in that show than it is here. So I was just very caught off guard with that comment from Paris, but I'm curious to like see more about it. Anywho, returning to the actual scene at hand, another thing I liked was this conversation between Paris and Rory as they're bonding, sharing more details. Paris kind of asks her about Dean and says she's sorry that they broke up, and they bond over guys making them nauseous. Like, whereas like Dean made me nauseous at the start, and Paris says like she's probably gonna want to puke like 12 times going to the car, and that's why she went to Rory. And I just loved this like representation of like friends. We've seen this with Lane and Rory before, of like turning to someone for moral support in this moment, and I find it so relatable. Like, I too have been very nervous before not only a date, but just something like an important meeting or something like that, and you just go to your friends for like, please help me.
Yeah, seriously. Again, bad choice in shirts because of this reason. We also find out that Paris has prepared note cards for talking points for the date, which I thought was adorable and also not a bad idea. So I'm not saying take them to the date with you and pull them out on the date, but there's no harm in like kind of refreshing yourself on some topics that you could talk about. I would say this especially if you're going like on a blind date or something, like, you know, just kind of refreshing yourself. And especially if it helps with nerves, like this probably really helped calm Paris down, knowing that she had these talking points in her back pocket. So I don't see what the problem is, except actually taking them out on the date, like at the dinner table. That would be awkward.
Right. And was the card that Rory tells her to remove about the Spanish Inquisition?
That may be.
And she said maybe not romantic enough. So also keep them a bit, at least a little topical, right? Okay. And we find out later they go to a movie anyways, which is a good date because you don't have to talk all the time.
Yeah, and then you can talk about the movie.
Right. Okay. Yeah, so meanwhile, Lorelai is at a Saturday night dinner. Not usual for the show. And basically the main thing that comes out of this dinner is Trix suggesting that loaning money is a dirty business.
I actually had my gazebo moment in this. So first off, maybe it's unfair of me to be nominating Trix kind of in general in this scene, but she brought Rabbit with her from London, which is ridiculous. But then, I think she quotes Shakespeare and says, "Neither a borrower nor a lender be." And then she poses this question about whether Lorelai thinks Shakespeare is a wise man. And I had to bring this up because Shakespeare is known for many things, but I would not consider being wise as one of them.
Mm-hmm.
He was prolific. He was a good writer. But I don't, he wasn't a philosopher or anything. I think she just meant like, this is a smart sentiment, which is true. But I just thought it was kind of funny. So that was my gazebo moment for the episode. For some reason, I had a hard time picking out a moment.
Yeah. I hear you. And so this leads into this conversation about offering up a trust fund for Rory. And you see Emily very stone-faced. She doesn't react outwardly, but I think the very stone-faced, we can sense internal turmoil already from this news, which is what we'll hear about her feelings about this more later on, as Emily kind of follows Lorelai out and she starts to express all of these kind of doubts or concerns and really gets into Lorelai's head with some of these comments about how money is freedom, and if Rory gets that money, she won't need Lorelai anymore. And Lorelai's kind of laughing this off, telling Emily she's not being, telling her she's crazy and things like that. But Emily's saying, you think losing your daughter is funny, but she'll move out once she has options, and it's terrible not to be needed. You'll see. These are kind of snippets of what she was saying. And I'm just like, how does Lorelai not hear? Clearly, Emily is voicing what has happened to her and her actual, it's terrible not to be needed. That actually, we've said so many things about Emily. She's not perfect. But, that hurts to hear, she feel oh, there's such emotional weight to that. And money is the thing that has brought them together again. And I'm like, Lorelai, can't you just hear? It's not about you, actually. It's about Emily.
Yeah. Yeah, they're both missing the point that it's actually about Rory. But
yeah.
I do feel like it is so obvious here. And if Lorelai had just acknowledged it, maybe it would have turned out okay and the money would have still been around. But it was really sad to hear Emily talking about basically kind of noting everything that she felt when Lorelai left her, and Lorelai still not hearing it.
Right. Because it's when we have the perspective of Lorelai, we view this it's they have such a contractual obligation that have to go to dinners to go to keep up the end of the deal, and it's a chore to do, and we're wow, Emily's kind of a bad person for making them have to come every time for this money. Why can't they just give it to them and then they could choose to go or not? But it's also when you think about her motives for doing that are coming from this place of actually wanting a relationship, and that's almost a ruse that she doesn't even care about, really. She doesn't care about the contract, but she just wants to see her daughter. It's complicated and sad.
Yeah. I felt bad for Emily. I wish there had been some clearer communication, but there never is. It's a show.
I'm going to make that same point later on in their tea conversation.
Oh, yeah. After this, so Emily is ushering, or Lorelai is running out of the door to go and talk to or tell Rory about this. By the time she gets home, she's kind of rethought that, sees that Rory's asleep and just leaves it for the next day. But the next day dawns with Sookie and Lorelai at the flower shop, which looked beautiful. We also get a shot of our troubadour friend singing some songs. And Lorelai is telling Sookie what happened and kind of ranting about how Emily went off on her. Sookie, as usual, knows exactly what's happening. And also realizes why Lorelai hasn't told Rory about it yet. Which is that Emily's gotten into Lorelai's head. And Sookie is trying to point that out. Lorelai, of course, dismisses it.
Yeah. And it seems simultaneously another conversation is happening between Emily and Richard. This is when we see Emily like really worked up, more than we've seen so far. Richard says she's hysterical, which is never a great thing to call a woman, especially when she's worked up. It does, like, what a loaded term, and also it's simply just not going to calm someone down, right? And Emily's saying like that Trix has demeaned her, she's looked down on her, she said Emily tarnishes the name, like insinuated that she's the whore of Babylon. And she's given up getting into her psychotic good graces. I just loved all of those phrases. Emily has such a flair for the drama. But like, this is unforgivable, basically. And Emily, even though like when she was warning Lorelai, at the surface level, her warnings were about Rory and Lorelai, and we could read into them and clearly see what was actually going on. But she didn't actually admit what she was really feeling or what she was really scared of until this moment with Richard, where she finally admits, and it kind of like says out of the blue, like, she'll never come back, Lorelai. She won't have to. And that was my gazebo moment, actually, because like, I was waiting for that moment. I could kind of recall from my memories of watching the show that she says something like that, and it's just so heartbreaking. And it's not a happy gazebo moment, you know, but it's just so well written. I feel like it furders this storyline and like the progression of their characters, and we're getting a sense of like the emotional weight that's going on underneath all of these like casual fights they're often having, the bickering, like underneath all of that, there still is this true feeling of like to feel that your daughter is only there because she has to be is heartbreaking in itself. But then also to feel like that you're willing to accept that just to keep seeing her and to keep her coming back is also heartbreaking too. And there's so much to say, of course, about how Emily is responsible for creating much of that circumstance to begin with. But like, to just hear her admit that, I think is so powerful.
Yeah, it was such a vulnerable moment. I also liked Richard's response, which was to say nothing. But
yeah, they just look at each other.
Yeah, but he gave, I don't know, this act, I should know the actor's name. It's like at the tip of my tongue.
Edward Herman.
Yeah. He's like so good at just giving like a knowing look. And we've already had this a couple times with him and Lorelai. But here I felt like he really like portrayed that he heard Emily and heard her vulnerability and like understood where she was coming from at this point, even though he'd kind of been almost to the point of saying that he would side with his mother over Emily in this whole debate. But I liked how he finally understood, had a light bulb moment. Of course, we don't get to see what they talk about later, but
that's a good point. Like, he doesn't say anything, but I think you're right that we get the sense that he hears her perfectly, and that nonverbal acting is just top notch.
It's a talent.
But before we get to the final scene between Emily, Lorelai, and Trix, we do have the wrap up of the Sunday morning study session, day 2 of this group project. And it's so unbearable to even talk about.
First off, what kind of teacher assigns a group project on a Friday that's due on a Monday? That's terrible. But it starts off with Rory sitting on a bench doing homework or reading about the government or whatever. And Paris comes up, as we've said, in a very nice outfit with like a long, I think it was kind of a burgundy cardigan. I really liked it. But she comes up. Rory asks her how the date went. Paris seems to think that it went really well. They even kissed at the end. And it seems like everything is on a good track. But then Tristan walks in. And Paris goes over to talk to him to kind of say like, oh, I had a great night last night. We find out that Paris has been a little bit overzealous with telling him this with 5 messages, which I understand is way too much. So I kind of get what he's coming from.
Not quite as many as Dean, we've
It's
heard.
true. Yeah, that's true.
But she like says like, okay, you got the message. My bad. I overdid it. Like, come on, cut her some slack. She's new at this.
Yeah, I God, I just felt so bad for her in this moment. Because she proposes that they do it again sometime, and he said, "Yeah, I'd really like that." And then he kind of pauses as friends, and you just see her face like go from just like happy and hopeful to disheartened. But then, of course, it doesn't end there. It gets even worse. He says, you know, when Rory suggested this, and with that, Paris's face goes from disheartened to livid.
Yes.
And because Tristan just outed Rory for matchmaking them, more or less, which, as we've said, is like that's the worst thing. It's like to be. It really does seem like Rory is giving her cast-offs.
Yeah.
To Paris at this
point.
It does. Because Rory's like, to get him off of my back, I'll say he should go out with Paris. And it's just terrible for Paris, especially if this is her first dating experience.
Yeah, so she kind of turns from Tristan to approach Rory about this, really angry, says that she doesn't want to be a charity case, that she is humiliated, and she's saying this once again. You know, we've talked before about Paris's like loudness and the fact that I think everyone in the room can hear this fight at this point, which maybe like furthers her humiliation a little bit, but I'm not really gonna blame her. I think she's just like in the heat of the moment, feeling really hurt, storms out. Like I said, I just had a pit in my stomach because I thought this is definitely going to affect their friendship for the foreseeable future. And Rory then is angry about this. You know, she's like now angry that Paris is angry. So she goes over and accuses Tristan of telling her. And I feel like understandably is like, I didn't know, I couldn't tell her. Like that part was not communicated to him. And, wow, I just, I said I was on Tristan's side for a minuscule minute there. I felt wrong.
I agree, though. I almost got the feeling that Rory came to lash out at him out of a feeling of guilt because she realized that she had proposed them dating, like, for the wrong reason.
Exactly. It was her.
Yeah, she realized that she'd done it just to get him off her back, more or less. Not for any real matchmaking reason.
And, earlier Paris had said that she has like great powers of deduction. I don't remember in reference to what. Either way, I wrote in my notes that Rory does not have Paris's power of deduction because she does not realize Tristan is talking about her when he says like, I like someone else. And that is you, Rory, clearly.
This was such a teen rom-com moment. Like, he's just sitting there looking all, like, downcast, and she doesn't even realize, and everybody is screaming at them, like, obviously he's talking about you, Rory. Part of me is glad that he doesn't make it more explicit, just because then things would have gone differently. But this was just such a terrible scene to watch. It was just like secondhand embarrassment for everybody involved. Yeah,
seriously. It's like, I feel so hard for Paris. I also don't want Rory and Tristan to be together. I had completely forgot about this like second wave of the Tristan and Rory of it all. I did not remember that like in the interim of Rory and Dean, there's like this like bit of flirtation or development between Tristan and Rory. I think I only remembered Tristan as like the asshole at the beginning. I've honestly been surprised that he's been around for almost all of season 1. Maybe I had blocked it out of my memory.
He does stick around. I'm remembering a very specific scene that might be in the next couple of weeks.
Okay. I'll brace myself for it.
So after this, we go to high tea. Before we talk about this scene, I just have to say, going to high tea is a wonderful thing. It makes you feel so fancy. You get the little tea cakes and little treats. It's very cool. I mean, now that anybody can go to high tea, now that it's not a societal limitation.
Mm-hmm.
But they go to tea at this place. I'm assuming it's kind of like a fancy hotel or a fancy tea house or something. When Lorelai shows up, Trix isn't there, so it's just her and Emily. And they kind of start talking again about the money. It kind of seems throughout this conversation that Lorelai starts to pick up on what Emily's really feeling about the money and about what Rory having it, what that would do to their relationship. Lorelai explains that there's no amount of money that would change her and Rory's relationship.
Yeah, it seems like Lorelai's had this, resurgence of her confidence that the money wouldn't affect her and Rory, and she wants an apology from Emily about that. But I still was feeling that, and I mean, I would blame Emily for this one. Like, Emily's not saying, I'm worried about our relationship and how money has affected our relationship. And I think Lorelai would be receptive in this moment if Emily admitted that to her right now. But she does not, and so it goes unsaid. And it was just like, if she could have just said, I support this trust fund, but I'm really worried that you and Rory won't be a part of our lives anymore. Would you still keep coming to dinner on Friday? Like, we love to see you. Like, come on. I guess, do you need a season 2 at that point, though? Like,
Yeah.
Is it too early to resolve these things? Maybe.
I really got the feeling at this point that Emily had completely forgotten that this money, like, this was about Rory's future and Rory's,
Right.
like, education. In her mind, it was all just about how money is the tie that binds Lorelai to her. And that was about to be severed. Well, that was kind of poetic.
Right. As many things, the fights that are going on do not center Rory when they should. Like the Max and Lorelai fights, all of these different things we've pointed out before. Like, hello, do not forget the target of everything.
The child that you should be thinking about first and foremost, maybe. But eventually, Trix comes back and she kind of calls T off. She says that she wants to leave. We find out that she really just doesn't want to listen to this terrible display anymore in the tea house. But she also has come to the conclusion that both Emily and Lorelai, more or less, are not mature enough to deal with this trust fund. So it's off the table, which I think is a little bit extreme. I don't see why she couldn't have just said, let's make it 21 instead, because as far as we know, Rory never has a trust fund after this, which seems strange from her economic background. But
yeah, and Trix says that she questions the maturity of everyone involved, and pointedly meaning Lorelai, and that she doesn't want to trust with the money, and she thinks that Lorelai gets this immaturity from Emily. So, yeah, I definitely hear you about the way that she was treating Lorelai at that initial dinner when they met. But this felt very much like a case of turning on someone immediately when they don't act like you want them to or do what you want them to. It's like she was willing to be amused by Lorelai at the start, but now that it's like I think now that Trix aligns her as acting more like Emily, it's like she's cut her out completely. Like, okay, you're not like a true Gilmore, and I'm done with you. And I have no time for you raising your voice during high tea. Who heard of such a thing? Like,
yeah. And again, Trix here is also forgetting that this money could be fundamental to Rory's development.
Yeah.
And that's what should matter. I'm sure there are ways to do this, but if she wanted to make sure that Lorelai didn't have as much say in the money, I'm pretty sure you can write that kind of stuff into these trust fund rules or whatever, however they work. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I agree. I liked Trix in the beginning, and I still like what she brings in the sense of humor, but in this instance, I think she was a little bit extreme. A lot of what she did was unnecessary, and yeah, poor Rory. As Lorelai says later, she missed out on $250,000 because of the kind of pettiness of 3 women.
The third Lorelai is negatively affected by the first 2 and the Emily. And the scene is wrapped up with Emily saying she's sorry, and she does seem genuinely sorry. Like, I think after this has all happened, she realizes the weight of how Rory will be affected by this, a little too late. But she's kind of like, what can I do to make it right? I can try to talk her back into giving the trust fund. And Lorelai's kind of like, it's fine, it's over. But she does agree to not make them take the coat rack back, which is a kind of nice little line that indicated they've forgiven each other because they're now joking about the coat rack again.
Lorelai at one point also says something about next week, and I feel like that really made a difference for Emily, just more of a confirmation that this would be an ongoing relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like, see you next week. And yeah, speaking of seeing you next week, I think that brings us to the end of our episode.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but this was a fun episode, but I wouldn't call it one of my favorite episodes, to be completely honest.
See, I was really into this episode, more so than maybe like the one where they go to the Concert Interruptus was a bit more of a rough one for me. Same. I don't know. I feel like the more we watch, the more we'll start to tune into like what kinds of episodes are most gripping for us, or I don't know. Yeah, if that makes sense.
What we have the most to say about.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, listeners, if you have figured out what episodes you have the most to say about, you can send us a gazebo moment from the first season and an email to talkingfastpodcast@gmail.com. or in response to our weekly Instagram posts about our gazebo moments. That's also Talking Fast Podcast at Instagram. And as always, we really appreciate if you can rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast.
Cool. And we'll see you next time. I have a feeling something dramatic is coming.
Ooh, okay. Until then.
Yeah.